With yours truly, Dr. Sarah L. Webb. This is the 7th episode in my fall series on colorism and media. Do me a favor, if you are watching live, type in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me, see me, etc. I'm really excited about today's episode because we have a special guest who you'll get to meet in just a minute. But we're going to be talking about love scenes and how media shapes desirability politics and why colorism is not just a matter of preference, okay? So before we jump into that, do say hello in the chat. I have a couple of things I usually like to ask people. First is where you're tuning in from. Okay, so let me know where you're located, but also what's your zodiac sign. I say it every week. You know, I rep Gemini gang, but also I love all the signs. Okay, so spreading the love there. Hey, Kyra, welcome. Congrats on being the first one to type in the chat. I know I started like a minute or two late, so apologies for that. And I always like to start with affirmations. So as people are coming into the room, I want to set my intentions, rather. Not affirmations are for the end, intentions are for the beginning. So I have 3 intentions for this series as well as each episode. The first is to have fun, making genuine connections in real time. So again, even if you can't participate in the chat, I hope that you are appreciative of the live energy that I'm providing here. But also I want to go deeper beneath the surface and not just skim the surface of conversations around media and colorism. So one of the benefits of talking about this every week is that we get to look into all the nuances, all the subtleties, all the layers and variations of colorism and its impact in media. And then also I want to facilitate collective healing and transformation for us as individuals, but also for us as a collective, okay? So welcome, welcome, welcome. I see 5 people on the ticker. Hey, Michael. So Kyra beat you today, Michael. Gemini in the building, okay? Kyra asks, is the writing program going on this week? Yes, I'm teaching a writing workshop in Baltimore this week. It is full. We have all 15 seats are taken, but I will be doing it again, maybe in different cities as well. So yeah, make sure you're following on social media so that you know when I'm hosting events, when they'll be in your city, etc. Okay. Joining from the Peach State, I assume that's Georgia. Welcome, Georgia. I was just in Georgia, which brings me to something I want to share. So I always start with a throwback photo. Y'all know this throwback photo is not from too long ago, actually. And this is a photo of when I was in Atlanta recently because I did a special segment, a digital segment for a TV network, which I will announce on Tuesday when it comes out. But I'm sharing it here to give y'all a preview, to kind of like, you know, a teaser of sorts. I'm really excited to share. So it's like a throwback, but also like a preview. It's a throwback and a preview at the same time. And related to our topic, we have the weekly survey. So y'all know I love to do surveys and bring your responses to said surveys on the program to discuss. And so my question this week, let's see which version is better for you to see, was your first crush a celebrity? Okay. So 41 people voted on this one. I should have 41 likes, right? So I'm just going to like, if y'all voting on my surveys, be sure to give me a little like, you know, to help boost the survey in the algorithm so that more people can take the surveys. But of 41 people, which again is not a representative sample, and honestly, I don't even know if all 41 of these people will follow my page, right? Because you don't have to be a subscriber to my page to vote on these surveys. So I ain't no telling who these people are, but I appreciate you for voting. I appreciate the engagement for sure. And so what is it? 44% of the people said nope. Their first crush was not a celebrity. And 46%, so the largest percent of us said, yep, their first crush was a celebrity. 5% said they do not remember, which is a common thing, I think. And then 5% said, to me, they were. And I really like that response. I threw that one in there just for fun. And so the reason why I asked this question leading up to today's episode, to today's conversation, is because I wanted us to start to think about how even from early ages, even in our youth, even when we are most impressionable, media is shaping our ideas and notions and constructs of relationships, of romance, of partnership, of sex, of our own sexuality, as well as what it is in the larger society, of who's beautiful, of who's considered attractive or desirable, who's worthy of marriage versus who is supposedly not, right? And all the myriad things that go along with that. And so this was just like a low stakes way to start to have us reflect on, if my very first crush was a celebrity, then could that point to the fact that the media has had a disproportionate impact on my ongoing or future so-called preferences and desires, okay? So I'm really excited about today's guest, Dr. Donna Oriowo, and she is not only a really dope Black woman who is also dark skinned, she is a licensed therapist. Let me get this off the screen right quick so you can see more. And she focuses specifically on sex therapy. And she has a retreat coming up. She does lots of work. She has a workbook. She'll be able to tell you about all those things. And so I'm going to bring her on now. Let me see if there are any more introductions in the chat. Okay, M. Nicole from Buffalo, New York, and a Pisces. Welcome, M. Nicole. I'm currently in New York City. I am in downtown Manhattan. So let's get into our conversation with Dr. Donna. Hello. Welcome. I have met you before, but there are probably lots of people in this audience who have not. So just give us a brief introduction. I'm sure we'll have time as the conversation progresses for us to learn more about you. But what would you like to share with people to start off about who you are and what you do?
Well, I am Dr. Donna Oriowo. I'm a sex and relationship therapist, focusing specifically on how colorism and texturism impact mental and sexual health and well-being. I like to say I help Black women feel free, fabulous, and effed. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, I try to keep it clean.
Oh my goodness. So with that, let's talk about why you think this work is important.
I think that that's a damn good question. I think that part of the reason that this work is important is because we're sexual beings from birth till death, but our sexual scripts are also often negatively impacted by the white supremacist dominant culture. And if we do not acknowledge where that shows up, where not just colorism and texturism, but also capitalism, general sexism, if we are not noting where these things are sort of coming in, we're not noticing how then our own sexuality has been distorted. We're not seeing the way in which it's been made to be deviant, which means that we lose our access to pleasure. And if you're not having a pleasure-filled life, what kind of life are you having?
Okay, y'all. So now y'all already see. Like 2 minutes in? And we already got all the gems, okay? So the title of this episode is called Love Scenes, How the Media Shapes Desirability Politics and Why It's Not Just Preference. I'd like to hear your explanation of what desirability politics even means, because that's a word that has been used more frequently in popular discourse. And just so people maybe have a baseline understanding and a shared understanding, how would you explain it to folks?
Ooh, I would say, okay, number one, when most people talk about it, they talk about desirability politics as though it is who is desirable without thinking about the consequences of what it means.
Okay.
Right. So I think that a lot of people talk about it like, oh, these type of people are desirable and that's okay and it's fine. Mm-hmm. But to me, when I hear desirability politics, I'm thinking about who we say is deserving, who we say is worthy of love, of care, of basic benefits, of the right to their humanity. And that is very often based off what that person looks like according to the dominant culture's desire for specific looking people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to me, that humanity piece is something I want to return to a little bit later. Really quickly, for the person in the chat who wanted your website, it is scrolling across our screen right now, annadowright.com. And at the end, she'll be able to plug her socials and everything as well. But I'll leave that scrolling for a little bit so that people can write down or go ahead and search for your website now as they listen. I think it's the humanity or the lack there perceived lack thereof, or the intended dehumanization that is a big factor in that. And I love that you said it's not just who is desirable, but it's the consequences of that, right? And it's understanding that there's power attached to the perception of desirability, and then again the consequences of said power.
Because the consequences, we see the consequences every day, but
Yeah.
a lot of us do not want to take responsibility for how those consequences are negatively impacting other people's lives, as long as we are on the side of that which is desirable.
Okay, as long as we are on the side of that which is desirable, and that
Because
is
it's the hierarchy. So we're
yes.
constantly jockeying for a new position and trying to maintain our position and trying to maintain other people's position so that we don't have to be at the bottom.
Yes. I literally just having this conversation. I always say too, yes, we are jockeying for better positions, but we're jockeying in a race we can't win. And that's what I want people to understand. Like, okay, yeah, I see you trying to jockey for a higher position, but you still gonna lose the race.
Exactly. There is no winning, even if you think you've won. Because one has to, like, I guess the question is whether or not, when you look at, say, white folk, do you believe that white men have won? Do you think that they are winning within this structure that has been created? Because here's the thing, they're not. They are winning more than you does not mean that they are winning. That they have more benefits than you doesn't mean that they have won. It simply means that they are that which has been considered the most desirable in this hierarchy, but even they have lost their humanity. So who won?
Oh, even they have lost their humanity. And I know we're kind of going off scripts here, but that makes me think and realize, and you've made it so clear that what we've been conditioned to value is not our humanity. It's something else. It's a myriad of other things that we are conditioned to see as supremely valuable, right?
Exactly.
Access to financial capital, access to social capital, being perceived as sexually desirable or romantically desirable, right? Like we put those things on a pedestal at the expense of our humanity a lot of times. And again, that is the result, as you were saying, of violent systems. So to the point of my series in particular, how have you seen colorism specifically intersect with this desirability hierarchy?
Colorism intersects in the space where whiteness meets other. Right? Because whiteness gets to set they get to set the standard of what is considered to be the most desirable. They get to set the standard of what is beautiful. And as a result of them being able to set that, they have decided that the thing that is the most desirable is them. Which means that every deviation you are away from what they have already set is a deviation further you are away from perceived humanity. So white men win, but women are actually dehumanized, seen more as property than they are as people, right? I mean, this is why, like, and people don't like this one, so come gently to me, okay? But the whole institution of marriage is about the ownership of a woman going from her father to her husband, regardless of whether or not you are heterosexual or not. The idea is that your ownership passes from the father to the husband. This is why it is to have and to hold. It's the same sort of language that is in contract law, that somebody is allowed to have something, to have and to hold. So we are, in a way, we're constantly jockeying to even be owned by the system, which is cute. But women are already dehumanized. And so you have white men at the top, you have white women below them. And then there's racial hierarchy that has Black people solely at the bottom. Black people cannot advance in this hierarchy because if whiteness is goodness, if it's the best, they have had to cast somebody as being the darkness, as being the worst, as being the least among them, and also closest to being animals that you can get in human beings. And so Black people have been cast in that role. That means that beyond white people, it then becomes Asians, Latinx, and then Black people, and the indigenous population gets erased. So when we're looking at it this way, we have to consider all the ways in which we're trying to jockey for position, but most of us are never going to leave our square. We're never going to leave our section. So you can jockey for position in Blackness by being light. You can jockey for position by having longer, wavier hair. If you're a woman, you can do so. For men, though, it don't work that way, because being dark skinned is actually considered being more virile and masculine. So it looks different on men than it does on women. But the desirability portion of it, as well as just this hierarchy, it is not lost. So the desire that you have is based off already white supremacist delusion. And a lot of us have bought in. We've done drunk this Kool-Aid so daggone deep. There's nothing but ice at the bottom.
I completely agree about the in order for whiteness to construct itself, it did so largely in part by defining also what it was not, right? And so it
Only
needed
defining by what it's
yeah,
not.
it needed that opposite. It needed that foil, right? What, like, to use a literary term, it needed a foil to contrast itself with, right? It's like I can't conceive of myself as white unless it is pitted against an supposed other. And I agree. I don't think I put that in my original questions, but since you brought it up, I'm glad you did. I think it was organically going to come up anyway. We know this is that there is definitely 100% sex and gender difference, particularly around notions of masculinity and notions of femininity and what bodies, what types of bodies, what types of people, what types of groups of people are supposedly inherently masculine, are supposedly inherently feminine. And what I noticed is, because I actually did a series talking to Black men about colorism, right? And so some of them came from their personal experiences being dark-skinned men. Others came from, having experienced it, whereas others talked about like their unlearning of so-called preferences. And one of the things they often talked about was how they had phases, right? For Black men, they had phases where light-skinned men were supposedly in and where dark-skinned men were supposedly in. And what I found is that there was never a phase for women. I feel like at every generation, it was always the light-skinned women that were quote unquote in, right? Whereas men have seen this like sort of pendulum swing. I've seen it be steady and consistent for Black women, where within that box, within that layer of the hierarchy, lighter skinned women have consistently remained at the top of that hierarchy. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
I mean, what you said, right? like legit what you said. So like with men, even the swinging doesn't swing so extreme, right? So I think specifically of Morris Chestnut. He has been beautiful and popular from when dark-skinned men were popular to when light-skinned
That's
men are
true.
popular.
Yep.
He remains
Yep.
popular. He
Denzel
remains
Washington remains popular, right? Like there are many of them. Yeah.
and they're allowed to remain popular because of their connection to
Yep.
masculinity and the rightness of masculinity as a
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah.
If you are already considered to be broken or deviant or less than by any other factor, especially such a primary factor as sex or gender presentation, then these things, then you experience more of the pendulum swing. So like Drake, for example, he light skinned, he's considered effeminate, and he be whining on his songs like like people be like, oh, well, he whining, he's all in his feelings, and feelings are considered to be a female's trait. I mean, come on, I'm calling BS, but still, right? So when he has wanted to seem more gangster, he said, I'm a dark skin. I was just like, you's a what now? You said he's a light man in a light man's body, and I was just like, oh, Lord Jesus, please save us all.
Right.
But that association with a certain level of roughness, a certain level of even uncouthness is part of the thing that sort of defines the Black man, dark-skinned Black man's masculinity, that both allows access to being seen and considered as truly masculine while dehumanizing him
That
at the
part.
same time.
That part.
And leads to a touch of a lack of civilization that a light-skinned man has access to.
You going in, sis. You going in. I love it. Right? Because, so let's be clear, like that masculinity that has been associated with black men generally, but particularly darker skinned black men, that masculinity was seen as a primal, almost bestial like masculinity, right? And again, the dehumanization of that, right? The virility, like you said. Whereas lighter skinned men, if they are racially black, they still have that proximity to that seem of supposed ruggedness or masculinity, but then they're also afforded the perception of being more intelligent. They're also afforded the perception of being more professional or being more educated or being less threatening, being more quote unquote civilized or being less violent, right? And so a lot of times that's while light skinned men might complain like, oh, I have to prove that I'm tough or prove that I'm, just as black or prove that I'm just as much of a man. What you don't have to do is prove that you're less of a threat. Right. And so when I often speak to dark skinned black men, when they play into that or when they try to leverage or perform that hyper masculinity, that you're also contributing to your own dehumanization, right? For black men who participate in colorism in any kind of way, you are simultaneously supporting and undergirding a system that kills you. Literally, the system that kills innocent, unarmed black men is the same system you're supporting when you perpetuate colorism. And that's the layers of that. So let's talk about then how the media contributes to some of this. We know that it's not just the media that upholds and facilitates issues like colorism, but that's the name of this series. So we're going to focus on the role that the media plays in all this. And so what is your understanding or observation of how media portrayals, and when I say media, I mean obviously TV and movies, but it could be magazines, novels, right? Like, even if it's like romance novels or music videos, right? So like the full range of media. How has that contributed to some of the things we've been talking about?
Ooh, I believe that it's a loop with no beginning and no end. I think that the media is made up of people. And because it's made up of people, these people have their own biases that they brought into the space where they work and then perpetuate. Right. So it feeds the people see it, the people want more of it. They want that thing in their life. They create more of it. More people go into the media having the same sort of preferences. And so it just becomes this loop without end, where one is constantly feeding off of and feeding from the other. So it is to me, it is a relationship based off mutual destruction. And for me, the thing that I think is hidden within that loop that we're talking about is money. Capitalism is the root of this loop. The media needs to sell things, and the best way to sell things is to make you feel bad about things about yourself.
Yes.
Right? They will lament on the life you don't have. I'm looking like, please. For me, like, no shade. Americans, we don't have lives. We have work. We have work. We work, we think about work, we recover from work, and then we go work again. This is our loop. We are in a work space. And so they sell you on a life that you could have if you looked a certain way, if you dressed a certain way, if you smelled a certain way. So all of a sudden you're thinking about all these exciting things that would happen in your life if only you just bought the right products.
Yeah.
So they have to make you feel not just badly about your life, but also about yourself. And that helps to sell products because the products are the solutions to your problem. So it's like, hey, do you want to make more money so you can have more time? Then be light skinned. If you want to be able to, have a hot girl summer, you got to have this body wrap. You got to eat these no foods. You got to do this fasting. You have to do this. Like, it's constantly telling you and selling you on something being wrong with you that you have the power to fix with what's in your wallet. And because you're constantly looking to fix it with what's in your wallet, you don't have enough money, time, or wherewithal to even divest yourself from this system and come back to you to determine whether or not that's a loop that you enjoy. Because I would say even social media, right? Like I cleaned up my social. I don't see things that I don't like.
Right.
I'm just like, ooh, you colorist, you racist, you sexist. No, thank you.
Right.
Right? Like, no, thank you. I'm not watching
Right.
it. And this is not something that I want to imbibe. I also have limits on all of my social media. So I get an alert if I've been on social media for more than 20 minutes. Because then it's like, oh, girl, this is your life.
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, moving back, which is also why I'm inconsistent with my posting. But the whole point being that, like, this loop that exists, I think that I think it used to go from like TV and movies straight to people. And I think that it has expanded because now TV and movies have influencers to help, because now they feel like the everyday person who has insider knowledge of media to tell you what you should also be buying. So then you feel like, because you know this person, because you trust this person, because you like this person, that you use them to tell you that there also is something wrong with you so that you can buy the things that will fix you. And so the loop just continues. And it's just continuing at various levels, whether it's at a micro one-to-one sort of level, or whether it's at a one-to-many level, or from, you know, this movie, this studio, this whatever, to this, because they also are going by what they believe they can sell, right? What they believe they can sell you on. And it is easy to sell people on the stuff that is related to sexism and racism, because that's what this country was already founded on.
I also, as in hearing you talk, I hear the idea. So last week, was it no last week? One of these weeks, I had Cheryl Bedford on. Yeah, Cheryl Bedford on, who is the founder of Women of Color Unite, which is a Hollywood organization that helps, you know, women of color get their projects funded and produced and distributed, etc. And she was explaining to me, which blew my mind, that when it comes to Black representation in front of the screen and behind the screen, that Hollywood leaves billions of dollars on the table, right? And that it has already been proven that when people have women of color in leadership roles, when they have diverse participation in front and behind the screen, that they actually do financially well, that they actually financially prosper. And so what she said is that it was about whiteness, but then that also reminds me that whiteness is currency. And so when we have these conversations about capitalism, understanding that even capitalism is about power, and people will wrest power from us by any means necessary. And when people say things like, oh, these poor white folks are voting against their interests, they're actually not. It's precisely because they're poor that they lean so hard into their whiteness as the only form of currency they are guaranteed to have. And so when we think about not only selling you products so that they line their pockets, but selling you products that re-entrench the racist colorist hierarchy, right? The sexist hierarchy, right? So if this propaganda convinces you that you have to look like us, not only do we make financial capital, but we reestablish ourselves in our social capital, in our racial capital, in our color capital, right? And so there are multiple forms of currency being exchanged through this media, and I think that's part of the conversation as well. It's like, you know, I think on one of those episodes, someone says whiteness trumps green every time. And we see that with particularly the lower class or poor white people, working class white people who, yeah, I'm not making any money. I'm struggling to pay my rent, but you can't take away my whiteness, right? Until they do, because we know that whiteness has shifted over time too. And I'm like, okay.
But I love this, like the whiteness as a type of currency, because it is. I think that's, and I would even say it's a type of insidious currency, because we are supposed to not see it.
Yes.
And we're not supposed to see it even as a type of currency. So instead, we are supposed to just say that, oh, white people are white people, and meanwhile we want to miss the ways in which we are also white people. The ways in which we are also supporting the system, because If you say preferences out your mouth, you are supporting white supremacy. It is the currency that you are trying to also uplift. Like, oh, I prefer to have somebody with this hair texture, this skin tone. I'm looking like those preferences are also you trading in on white supremacist delusional currency. It is you helping to uphold, support, to reify, and to justify the current status quo.
Yes. Yeah. And trying to access it, like you're saying, right? So, again, this is not part of my pre planned questions, but like what you're saying is a lot of times when people say, oh, no shade, no hate, but I just don't date black women, right? Or I just like white girls. I don't know. I just like Latina girls. Never mind the fact that you can be black and Latina, but that's another conversation. Or I just like light skinned girls. Or I just like mixed chicks, right? And people, especially coming from men, but black women do it too, and we can talk about that. But either way, regardless of your gender or your sexual orientation, those so-called preferences, and I say they're preferences, but they're racist, colorist, misogynoirist preferences, right? But it is you trying to gain capital and currency by proximity of your partner, of your significant other, right? And so it's like, how can I elevate my status? How can I have access to more currency by aligning myself with someone I perceive as having that very currency I wish to have? But yeah, okay. So
So
go ahead.
I just want to offer this. I don't call it preferences, not truly, because preference, the definition of preference is to have a greater liking of one thing over another thing, right? Can you like something that you have not even begun to unpack? Do you have desire for something, that a preference for something of which you have not even begun to examine where the hell it came from?
Right.
You don't even know if it's yours.
Right.
You know that you act it out, you know that you behave it, you know that you go outside and date with it, but it doesn't mean that it's yours.
Right.
So is it your preference or is it someone else's preference for you to have? Because if you tell me you don't date black people and you can't tell me why,
Right.
if the reason, like some people be like, oh well, because white women are more docile. Not true. I'm look like certain white women are more docile, right? Some people have been talking about the what's her name, Jenny Mai and Jeezy. They're getting a divorce, and that part of it is that he thought her to be more submissive than she was. Right, because these are part of the things that we say, right? Like that black women are difficult to deal with, especially dark-skinned black women. That white women are the easiest and most enlightened. They know how to be in their place. They know how to be submissive, right? That Latinx women are spicy and Asian women are basically geishas, right? That they're sexual, they have a good sexual prowess, but they understand their place. Right. So because we're going off these, quite frankly, racist ideas of what a race is, as well as sexist ideas of a woman's place, I'm like, do you have a preference or are you acting out someone else's desires for you? I'm like, because preference is your likes, but you don't know you well enough to know whether or not you like the thing you said you like.
You don't know you well enough.
You don't know the system well enough to understand how it's playing in your face, trying to tell you what you like. Nothing irks me more than people saying like, oh, I love McDonald's. No, you don't. No, you
are so funny.
What you love is the commercials and the ba-da-ba-ba-ba. It's catchy, bitch. Excuse my language. It's catchy. It's catchy. It's in your face. It's constant. It's also part of the reason why sometimes you hear a song the first time and you hate it. You know you don't like it, but suddenly you like it because all you kept doing was hearing it over and over and over again. That's not you liking it. That's repetition. So is it your preference for dark-skinned for light-skinned Johns, for dark-skinned men? Are these preferences or are these things that you've seen on TV?
Is it repetition? Exactly. Is it repetition? That's precisely to the point of what we're talking about, is the repetition of what people want you to prefer or desire or see as attractive. And also to your point about like the generalizations and the break in cognitive dissonance when you realize like, oh, this whole group of people is not the same. How you a whole adult and you have to f around and find out that a whole group of people is not the same, and would be pissed if somebody did that to you as a black man. Okay. Oh, you mean not all black men are trying to kill us and rob us and break into our houses? Oh my gosh, I didn't know. But yeah, you feel okay saying that this whole race of women is exactly the same, each one of them, right? Because I heard,
Passport bros. This is literally the passport
mm-hmm.
bros. They go into other countries saying that, well, these women are better women than the women we have at home. I'm looking like, baby, the food at home is fine. It's your tongue that is set to something else. And I wanted to acknowledge this comment. I want to encourage us to stop saying white supremacy because it's not supreme. I actually say white supremacist delusion for this very reason, because it's not supreme, but they believe that they are. And for me, it feels like a thing to note that we don't want to lose the white supremacy piece of it because they believe that they are. And I would even say that people of color also believe that they are. They believe that white shit don't stink, right? This is why you can go to a black shop and be like, oh, well, last time I'm coming in here, y'all don't have it together, while still taking your ass to Starbucks. Right? Because we believe that whiteness is supreme. So when I say white supremacy, I say white supremacist delusion instead, just to add in the fact that it is, in fact, a delusion.
Yeah, a straight up, and it's a straight up lie, right?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
lies and junk.
So I do want to get to this because we already passed the half-hour mark. In terms of media representation and how it shapes, intentionally shapes what the masses of people are trained to perceive as beautiful, desirable, worthy, all human, all those things. I also know and acknowledge that these systems do impact the way we see ourselves and the way that we show up as well. And I know your work speaks to this about helping women to feel sexually liberated, right? And I've had conversations about like with people who have asked me, right? Like if you are, for example, darker skin and you're struggling with your perception of your own self as desirable, then maybe you're encouraged to lower your standards or to accept certain types of treatment, or even people assuming that you should settle for certain types of treatment, even if you don't want to, right? So can you speak to how we also have to be careful, especially us. I'm speaking to other dark-skinned black women in particular, but I guess this could apply to other groups as well, of how the media not only shapes our view of the desirability and worthiness of other people, but how it is also might impact our view of our own desirability and worthiness, and then how that shows up in our relationships, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. I'm in the process of writing a book. It's due by the end of like the month, so I'm coming up on due time. But one of the things that I've been saying is that like self-esteem is not self-taught, and I think that a lot of times we have been taught that if you don't have self-esteem, the problem is you, as not the problem is also within the community. We are not taught to like ourselves in a bubble. We don't learn it on our own. We learn it from the people around us by the way that they treat us and by the way that we believe then that we're supposed to be treated based off our first exposures. Dark-skinned children are simply not treated well, often by their very parents that gave birth to them. Right? They are allowed to go further. They're allowed to not do as well in school. They're allowed to just be, because it's like, well, nobody wanted that. No one wanted that kid that way anyway, right? Light-skinned children are not allowed to roam. They're kept a little bit closer to home. They have a tighter leash, as it were, placed upon them to look, and act a certain way, whereas dark-skinned children are expected to be then of service to their light-skinned siblings, to their light-skinned parents. So I'm often talking about like intergenerational colorism and what that even looks like therapeutically. But in order for us to get to a place where we are finding ourselves desirable, we have to surround ourselves with other people who believe it is true. Let them be some of the people that teach you. We're trying to do a lot in silos and alone. And I'm like, the cure here is not you alone. It's you within a community of like-minded people who can help to remind you when you don't remember. Sometimes they start off being the ones to validate you. But when you get to a point where you have it for yourself, then they can just confirm what you already know. So the goal is to move from validation to confirmation. But sometimes we're trying to tell people that they need to validate it on their own first in order for them to just get the confirmation from others. And I'm just like, that's not how none of this works. It has never worked that way. And us saying it doesn't make it true. And you yelling it doesn't make it true. So for me, it's about like, how can you find the community of people who believe in your inherent personhood, who believe that you are deserving of love and care, who are believing that you are the shit, and that you don't have to use bleaching creams, grab a wig, that you don't have to change fundamental pieces about what you came out looking like in order to make other people feel like you are now somebody worthy of being seen, being loved, as someone that we should see and want to understand and to even listen to their experiences. For me, it's about, what does the community work within this? Because we've tried doing it the other way. It don't work because it's not ours. That's white shit. Community work. That's our shit. And let's bring it back. I think there's something to be said about both. I believe there is some individual work that needs to happen, but that individual work can happen within the scope of a good community.
I'm just letting it sit for a minute. So we are getting to the end. So type your questions in the chat if you have some, because I could go on forever. I do want to give the audience an opportunity. But really quickly, before we get more into your work more specifically and what that looks like and how you work with Black women and things like that, I do want to touch again on that aspect of humanization versus dehumanization and the idea of fetish and fetishization, and how I've heard people, and I'm asking this question because I've heard people, for example, I've heard, dark-skinned women say, well, like, yeah, I dated this guy, and, we dated in secret, but he never introduced me to his parents, or I could never meet his friends, or, he said, well, now that I'm ready to settle down, I think I got to date somebody else, basically. But also I've heard people say that just because, or like use media examples where a dark-skinned woman is sexually desirable in the representation, but never seeing that representation of her being chosen as like a life partner, or like someone that is given greater value beyond just, sexual pleasure. And so, like, can you talk us through, like, from your expertise as well as your practice with like various clients and things like that, what is the difference, I guess, between like a humanizing attraction versus like a dehumanizing form of attraction that we kind of consider to be a fetish?
A humanizing form of attraction means that the person maybe initially saw a thing that they liked, but they also want to know you. They are interested in the you-ness that this thing comes packaged in.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a deeper desire to know you at your core, to cultivate friendship with, or to be your lover or what have you, but they want to do this thing, and it is not something that they feel ashamed of or that they feel like they need to hide. It is simply like, oh yeah. Right? It's like that, like, ooh,
Right.
I don't know how to describe that. So, but you got what I'm saying. Whereas the fetish, the dehumanizing fetish, is an obsession so deep into a feature that they don't need to know you at all.
Right.
They just need to know that you have this thing that they desire, and beyond that, they have no desire to know you, because knowing you detracts from their ability to see just that thing and to see you as just that thing.
Yes.
So I was with a brother. Once upon a time, he was trying to date me. He's super light skinned. And my dating background looks like the United Colors of Benetton, right? So it's just like tall, short, fat, skinny, stocky, whatever, and all the rainbows of all rainbow colors. Although I only dated one white guy because I was just like, you got to have limits. So like I'm doing all this lovely dating, and this person, all they kept commenting on was my skin. No one has ever seen somebody as light as me with somebody as dark as you. I was just like, never.
I know, right? Like nobody.
Nobody
in the whole,
I don't know
if that's
true, in the whole world, right? And it was the only topic of conversation he knew how to have, right? And it was a constant thing. He wasn't trying to know me. He was obsessed with my color.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look at your skin. Oh, look at your skin. People will say they never seen us together like this. And I'm just like, ooh. I stopped seeing him pretty quickly. I think we went on like a date and a half, right? Because I was just like, I told him, I was just like, you seem really obsessed with my skin tone and not nearly obsessed with getting to know me.
Yeah.
Like, you want to talk about the contrasting colors of our skin, but you don't want to talk about any contrasting ideas. I'm like, I don't feel like a person to you. I feel like skin tone with a coochie. And that was all you were looking for, which is great for you. For somebody else, go far away from it and find the person that is desiring to be your object.
Okay.
Because I'm not a person to you. I'm just skin.
Yeah. I will say this too, and it might come off as controversial or might make some people feel uncomfortable, but I think it's the conversation we need to have, is how many light-skinned women who play the game of colorism are actively participating in their own dehumanization. Because to date a colorist man is to date a man who does not value your full humanity. It's the same thing that a lot of light-skinned women are throwing themselves into, right, when you're dating colorist men, because they want a light skin tone with the coochie, right? Like that's what they want. And I actually saw a film, I'll have to remember the name of it, but there was a colorist guy and there was a dark skinned friend he had, like his best friend was dark skinned and she was like in love with him, but he only dated light skinned girls. And so like towards the end of the film, spoiler alert, like the light skinned girl realized like he didn't know her at all, right? And they had already like moved in together and things like that. And she was like, what's my favorite meal? You know what I mean? Like, what kind of music do I like? And he was like, stumped, right? And so she was like, you don't really want me. You just wanted a light-skinned person. And like, which one didn't matter? You know what I mean? And so again, it's kind of like what you said, like white men haven't won, right? Like they're winning more than other people, but they haven't like won in terms of like what that means for our growth and evolution as humans, in terms of our humanity, right? Because they are also dehumanized, like seriously. And so for light-skinned women, again, jockeying for position in a game you can't win, like, are you willing to give up your humanity to be chosen? And maybe you are, right? But like, let's have that honest conversation.
Yes. I think that we forget that being desired is not being respected. Being desired is not being seen. I desire a cheeseburger. Doesn't mean shit else, but I want the fucking cheeseburger. It doesn't mean I respect the cheeseburger. Doesn't mean I love the cheeseburger. Doesn't mean I know the cheeseburger, right? I don't even know if that meat is halal, right?
And listen.
It is
I only want the cheeseburger because of what it does for me. I could care less about how the cheeseburger feels in this dynamic. I don't care. I want the cheeseburger because I'm hungry. And once I consume it, I'm done with it. I'm on to the next cheeseburger, right? And the fries and the.
When it comes to colorism preferences, it is one of being consumed. It is one of how your color, your whatever, elevates my status even momentarily, makes me feel good about myself even momentarily. So I use you until I am done. You become toilet tissue. You are used and disposed of. You are tossed aside. You are flushed. And just because you are Charmin and not dollar store brand, so seemingly, doesn't mean that your destination is not the same.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And I granted, like, because we're talking about interlocking systems of like sexism and capitalism. For historically, a lot of light skinned women were like, well, if my bills are paid, I'll play this game. I'll play this dehumanizing game. I'll be his fetish because he's also paying
Which
my
is what
bills,
white
right?
women do.
It's what white women have done, right? Continue to do. I'm gonna step into this, oppressed role because like the system, the society is set up in a way to where how else am I going to survive? Like, what are my other options? But again, like, it's one thing to play the game and know that's what you're doing. But I venture to say most of our light skinned women who kind of flex their colorism status, their colorist status, really are not consciously aware of the level, how dehumanizing it is, even for them, right? It's not a good look, is basically what I'm
They're not
telling
playing the game. They are being
you. Yeah.
played by the game. I'm looking like you getting
Yeah.
played. Like they done played right in your face and you took it up. You just sip this water wondering why it's not cool and thinking that you should just drink a little deeper and that it will make it feel cooler than what it is. It's never going to be cool because it was never for you. It's always for the person that was consuming you. So you lost and so did they, but your losing also helps to further dehumanize them and increase the level of violence against them and make you feel safe. So you perpetuate violence against dark-skinned people while thinking yourself that you are not complicit in the violence that happens to the other because you are deciding that colorist men or colorist partners are what you need.
That
Because if you get your value from your skin tone, then you've also devalued somebody else.
also, that what you just said. So one is the acting like they're not complicit. So this goes to like the whole so-called reverse colorism thing, where light skinned women was like, "Oh, I don't know why dark skinned women are have a problem with me." Like, really, you don't know? Because they like a lot of light
Like
skinned
you are
women
not unaware.
feign this level of innocence. And it's just like with white folks. Like, even if you're not actively calling me tar baby, you don't have to actively be bullying me to still be complicit in my oppression. And that's what a lot of our light skinned sisters are not coming on board to understand, right? And so when we talk about that relationship between lighter skinned women and darker skinned women, a lot of it is, even if you as an individual have not bullied a dark skinned girl or like, taunted a dark skinned girl or tried to put yourself above a dark skinned girl, you're still benefiting from a system that will inherently elevate you. But also, silence is violence, right? If you aren't actively trying to dismantle colorism, if you're not actively, proactively trying to create this space to do this work, then you are complicit in the violence and oppression against darker skinned people. But I will also say, because they quick to tell dark skinned women that we have low self-esteem, but I said this in my support group once and I had to explain. I was like, a lot of light skinned women have low self-esteem. And the bravado.
I have an entire chapter on this in this book that I am writing. I'm looking like number one, self-esteem is on a spectrum, but I'm looking like self-esteem that belongs to somebody else, that is based off the whims of whether or not somebody is going to like you or not like you, means that it's not your self-esteem. It's their esteem in you that you are feeling. It's not esteem in self that you are feeling, which means that the shit is not there at all anyway. It's conditional.
Conditional.
Whether or not people like
Yes.
you, which means that light-skinned women ever went out, they would not know what to do with themselves.
That's what I'm saying. Yes. If you took away the guy buying you a drink at a bar, somebody's mama saying, "Oh, you such a pretty little girl." If you took that away, where's your esteem? You see what I'm saying? And so this assumption that just because light-skinned women like to flex their other people's desire for them, right? Like, that's really what they're flexing. They're not flexing on any inherent form of beauty. They're flexing on the fact that someone else has validated them. And think about that, y'all. Like, we need to stop making the assumption that light-skinned women are confident or that they inherently don't struggle with self-esteem. Because again, whatever seeming confidence, whatever seeming self-esteem they do have, it's a majority of them who play into that system of colorism, it is all external validation for them. And when they don't have that, what are they left with? But yeah.
Boom. This is similar to how people say like, oh, be grateful for what you have because somebody else has it worse. This is that. Because the worst then is the dark-skinned woman. The worst then is the dark-skinned fat woman, the dark-skinned fat woman with kinky hair, the dark-skinned fat woman with kinky hair who is not straight. You can go on and on and on and on with intersections of, generally, I would say, intersections of fuckery, and where people are just going to continue to
Yeah.
delineate that this is a
Yeah.
person who is worthy and this is a person who is not, because it is your flexing that you don't have it as bad as somebody else, which is not to say that you actually have it good. It is to say that you're saying, I'm being grateful for the fact that you're poor and I'm not. I'm being grateful for the fact that your people or you are met with violence and I'm not.
Until you
It
are.
is not based on you being happy with you or feeling safe in your skin. It is that there's somebody who is more unsafe than you. And then when that person becomes eradicated and is your turn, you don't know what to do with you because now the status quo has changed.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, we all think it's all fun and games until it's our turn.
Yeah.
Right? So not being in the Klan doesn't mean that you're innocent of racism.
Right.
It just means that you're not in the KKK.
Right. All right. Okay, so let's get into what's the nature of your work with Black women in terms of how it addresses issues like colorism related to relationships and sexual expression and the various forms that those interlocking systems take.
So I like to say that my work is two-pronged. So on the therapy side, I do therapy, individual couples, etc. And in that space, it is a lot of what you were talking about before, light-skinned women with these men who don't know them, who were with them for their skin tone, or even Black women who dated white men or married white men hoping to gain access to something, and then coming into their Blackness and realizing that this white man was not it. Right. So the work that I do is very much the healing portion of what can we talk about here about your relationship with your mom, with your family at large, with society, and how that stuff is showing up in your everyday, how it's showing up in how you go to work and how you date, and the sex that you're having, and the sex that you're having that you don't even want to be having, in your access and capacity for pleasure. So we are talking about all of these things in that way. And I think that what I find is that people are very surprised at how much colorism is already playing a role, how much texturism is already playing a role, things that they think as being non-tease or just childhood teasing, right? They're not seeing it as trauma that has now flipped them as a person and has changed their very scripts and the way in which they would date somebody and what they expect from somebody who is dating them or trying to court them. So therapeutically, I do that. Educationally, I wrote a book, Cocoa Butter and Hair Grease, The Self-Love Journey Through Hair and Skin, because it was based off the therapy. I was just like, look, I can't see everybody. A girl got limits, right? So I was like, let me write this book. Boom, book is out there. I also I'm doing my very first CE class for clinicians who want to learn how to deal with colorism and texturism in the therapy room. So that's another piece of the educational part. And every now and then I hold an 8-week group based off cocoa butter and hair grease for Black women, dark-skinned Black women specifically. I don't do, I like to do homogenous groups. So light-skinned women can be with the light-skinned women, dark-skinned women can be with the dark-skinned women. And if I'm going to do it all together, then I need to know that we are prepared to hear some shit that we may not want to hear. But I do an 8-week group to help people to begin to move through all of the stuff. I keep saying I'm going to do a retreat. I don't think that's going to happen, at least not for that. Right now, the retreat is limited to PTO, plan to orgasm, where we still are going to address those pieces around desirability politics and whether or not we even think ourselves worthy of pleasure, because it is very much playing a role in how we show up and what jobs we take and how we allow those jobs to treat us, who we date and how we allow those people to treat us, the sex that we're having. Again, people who don't like themselves, who don't believe themselves worthy, are less likely to ask for what they want sexually. They're more likely to endure. They're also less likely to report rape or sexual assault. because the idea, even from a consent standpoint, is that Black women don't have, number one, have the right to consent at all, and number two, you should feel honored that somebody would want to sexually assault you in the first place.
And even who's going to believe me?
Yeah, because like, oh, you're undesirable. No, who? Why would anyone want to touch
Right.
you? And if they wanted to touch you, they did you a favor. Why can't you just be
Yeah.
happy?
But also, didn't you ask for it? Aren't you fast? Oh, they were probably just fast little girls anyway, right? Like
Look at what
I've
she was
heard that.
wearing.
I've heard that when
Look at the music she was listening
right.
to.
Look at what she was wearing, but especially the adultification of Black girls, right? And this assumption that they can't be victims of these crimes of like sexual assault and rape because, oh, well, they probably wanted it, right? Simply because she's Black. And that was the justification used during chattel slavery, right? Like, oh, Black women must have wanted this, or, like, so there's a whole history there about not only would that person not feel worthy of reporting it for the reasons you stated, but also even just systemically, even if we do report it, we are not supported when we report it, right? And so there's that dynamic of protect Black women, protect Black girls for that reason. Like, so that it starts with in your own mind ridding yourself of those narratives, because sometimes it's the child's own parents, the child's own mother and father, their own family. They're the people who are supposed to be there in that most traumatic moment in their lives when they tell someone who like starts to shame them in that moment, right? So there's like, yeah, there's a lot there in terms of the misogynoir around not reporting it, and especially for darker skinned people, that layer of colorism.
Look at Roe.
Yeah.
She got hit in the face with a brick,
Right.
and everybody is doubting her story, Black women included. Like, we say protect Black women, we say believe Black women, but then when it's time, I'm looking like, well, where is your work?
Yeah. Is PTO full? Are you still looking for registrants?
It's I'm not looking, but my assistant she's still looking.
All right.
I am satisfied with where we are,
Okay.
but we do have some room if anyone is trying to get into PTO this year.
Okay.
We are going to open up PTO to people who have not shown interest this year. We're going to open it up to those people in October. We're going back to Puerto Vallarta next year.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to get in now, it's cheaper now than it is going to be next
Wow.
year.
Okay.
Next year, the price went up. I done learned some things, and we are using that learning to make it better for next year.
Absolutely. Okay, so the website is up there. Let me open the chat. I haven't been on the chat as much because I've been wanting to like just engage in the conversation. So let's see. If you see a comment too that you want to pull out, then please feel free to do that. Well, first I will say I like comments like this. I have been waiting to watch y'all together. So excited for this. I know. I told you, like, my audience is going to be excited to meet you if they haven't already. But if they have met you, they're going to be excited for this particular conversation. So I really like that. Michael said he is Drake skinned. I don't know if he has like a particular moniker. Yeah. This is Sisters in Education Circle, aka Dr. Akosawa Lassane. This is such a powerful duo. So I'm like, thank you for saying yes, Dr. Donna.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So
Like, seriously, fat girl.
what is the alert that tells you have been on social media too long?
Oh, you have to set it on each social media. So I have my TikTok set for 20 minutes because I had fallen down TikTok rabbit holes and looked up, and it's been 2 hours later. I do the same thing on Instagram. You have to go to like settings or something like that and change the preferences for time.
Okay.
So that it will give you an alert. It ain't gonna kick you out. You gotta kick you out. You have to be disciplined that when that thing show up on your screen that you leave.
You actually leave.
So I have my daily limit for Instagram set at 1 hour. My daily limit for TikTok set at 2 hours because I prefer TikTok. And I don't really have a limit for like Twitter or nothing because I don't be on there.
Right. Says Kyra Barr says, I have noticed how dark-skinned women in film never receive beautiful love scenes.
Oh yeah, they're one-dimensional characters who are there to support their lighter-skinned counterparts. So they don't have beautiful love scenes, not very often, especially because dark-skinned Black people are seen as unlovable. So it's kind of like, well, why would you give them a love scene if you already think they're not lovable?
Right. Yeah. And even when they are cast as like a significant other in a film, I think part of what Kara is saying is like there's so much learning, there's so much programming and conditioning in the actual portrayal of tenderness and the actual portrayal of admiration. I think about scenes. Now, I will say one scene that surprised me was when I watched the Colin Kaepernick miniseries or whatever, and he took a dark skinned black girl to the prom or homecoming or something like that, right? I thought it was intentional when they, one, had a whole episode about it, right? And acknowledged how his friends were being colorist and how his parents didn't want to, were ashamed to put her pictures up on the mantle. And, but even at the dance, like they were intentional about showing his gaze at her of awe and admiration and respect, right? And like they really tried to show like how much he loved, you know, puppy love, teenage crush, right? Like that he was really like smitten, right? And so that's, I think, a storyline. And not, again, not just saying like, oh, we're casting his girlfriend as dark skin or his date as dark skin, but we're actually going to take the time to depict that moment of admiration, that moment of affection, right? That first kiss or that first slow dance. We're going to have a 5-minute scene where we get to see that interaction of how this person, this main character, this protagonist is treating a dark-skinned black woman with care, concern, affection, seeing after her, putting her, you know, there's no one else in the room except her, right? Like that kind of depiction I think is also important.
Agreed.
Yeah. M. Nicole says, sounds like every Lauren London film / movie. I don't remember what we were saying when this comment came through, but it does remind me of when in Issa Rae's first book, she talks about pitching Insecure, and she says they wanted to cast Lauren London as the main character. And Issa was like, absolutely not.
It's been a while since I read that book. And I done forgot that piece because it's just like, wait, what?
Right. K. Michelle said, first of all, I like not that one. K. Michelle, not that one. If you get your value from your skin tone, then you've also devalued somebody else. Who? Let me take a lap around the church. Okay, so basically, you out here preaching. That's what that is. All right, I don't see any like actual questions. Let's see. Kyra says, I like to use movies like School Days to show the differences between light skin and dark skin actualization.
I used it for my dissertation.
Okay.
School Days.
Yeah.
The first time I saw it was actually because of my dissertation. My chair was just like, I need you to watch this movie since you're going to be doing this work. Watch this movie and then we'll have a conversation about it. And we did. And I was just like, yo, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah. And, you know, I heard Spike Lee came out recently and said that he tried to do, I'm not going to name the school because I can't remember it, but he tried to film the movie on the campus of an HBCU, of a historically black college. And they said, no, you can't film it because the president thought that the casting of a certain actor was too dark-skinned, right? And so that was an interesting how, yeah, the film itself depicts colorism, but in the making of the film, right? Like colorism was involved.
Colorism.
Yeah. So this is an actual question. How do y'all feel about the movie Queen and Slim?
Ooh, geez. I thought it was something different than what it was when I got to the theater. On some things I try not to be spoiled. I remember seeing them. I was just like, we about to get a dark skinned black love story. Oh,
I know.
Shit.
Yep.
And it wasn't even that. It wasn't even that.
Yeah.
I was so profoundly disappointed. Because I felt like it was an opportunity for something that it never got to a place of even being.
And you know what? Up until the end, I thought it was. Like I was sitting down watching the whole movie thinking like, yeah, you know, finally. But then you get to the end and that's when you're like, nope. This is not the love story we asked for.
Honey bunches of nopes.
So, yeah. I will say that the storyline, so just for like a practical like teaching moment, the storyline I don't think is a love story that we want to see for dark-skinned people, but the cinematography, I think, in terms of when there were romantic scenes, when there was engagement between the couple, I think we can learn a lot from the cinematography of those particular scenes. But yeah, in terms of like the outcome or the story itself, I don't think it's, yeah, no, it's not. It's
I
not.
think they did a really great job of filming their skin
Yeah.
and letting that skin really shine on the
Yeah.
screen. That is my highest compliment. That's all I
Right.
got.
Kyra has a question. Let's see. Is it possible that dark skinned women don't enjoy pleasure because they feel that they don't deserve it?
People in general feel like they don't deserve it. Women, more specifically, believe that they don't deserve pleasure. Uh, Black women believe that they have to earn pleasure. Dark skinned Black women believe they have to do more to earn it. So, not feeling pleasure and not deserving pleasure are often going hand in hand. It's why one of the questions that I often am asking my clients these days is, what is your capacity for pleasure?
Mm.
Because we talk a lot about our capacity for pain,
Mm.
about our strength and our ability to endure. You endure the bullshit at work, you endure the BS with your family, but you don't know your capacity for pleasure because you don't even think of pleasure. We've been taught pleasure as an ancillary experience that one must earn after one toils.
What is your capacity for pleasure?
Yes.
So y'all know at the end of each session I do a reflection question. I'm scrapping the one I was going to use, and I'm going to let that be the reflection question. What is your capacity for pleasure? Okay. Your reflection question. I want you to actually take out a notebook or a journal, write the question down, rewatch this whole video if you have to, and reflect for yourself as an individual person, regardless of how you identify, regardless of anything. Every person under the sound of my voice, what is your capacity for pleasure? Okay. And I
And
like
think
the way you
things that
I like the way you layered it, right? You say people in general. And so again, it's like we have things that are resulted from colorism, but ain't nobody winning in these systems. You know what I mean? It's like we all have a lot of healing to do. It's not just like, oh, dark skinned women need to heal. Like, yes, we need to heal, but everybody needs to heal. Everybody has trauma from racism, from sexism, from patriarchy, right? And not to decenter dark skinned Black women, but what I'm saying is like we don't need to make ourselves as dark skinned Black women feel like we're the only ones. Like, oh, why does everybody else not have to deal with this XYZ? And so to kind of say like we are actually like part of a larger system where we have collective work to do and individual work to do. Diana James, I agree. That is very deep. Let's look at Kyra has a lot to say. Go ahead, Kyra. We ain't mad about it. I was also disappointed in the Lovecraft series on HBO and how the dark skinned women have to receive pleasure through false magic. Okay, I'm not familiar with the show, but I do. Go ahead. Okay.
I did watch that show. I was just like, yo, this show is showing, right? The show was showing. Um, and yet I definitely can also see what is being said here. I believe it was the dark skinned sister of, I don't remember anybody's character name. So I think her name is Journey. Her dark skinned sister, she found love with a white woman who was pretending to be a white man, like the magic within it. And it was all so beautifully fucked up and
Mm-hmm.
convoluted. They touched barely on colorism, even though it was a big part of I think, the relationship that one sister was having with the other, and the
Mm-hmm.
privileges that they were not able to, the privilege that the light skinned sister could not even conceive
Yeah.
as being a part of her ability to remain almost childlike and innocent,
Mm-hmm.
while this darker skinned sister had to take on so much brunt and force of the world around her and know that her skin would never be a saving factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of, based on like conversations I've seen with the actress, I see the same thing. To the question, I feel like I need to go on a journey before I can answer that. Well, Dr. Donna has resources and services available for that. And then KO says, "Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that question. LOL." Well, still ask it. So I want to tell people too, like if you ever get a reflection question, like a prompt, a question prompt, and you're like, oh, I don't know how to answer that, don't then shy away from the question. Sit with the reality that you don't yet know how to answer it, but continue to
And you can
ask it.
consider all the things that are in the way of
Yeah.
your being able to answer that
Yeah.
question. Because if I asked you about your capacity for pain, you would know your answers. You would know the origins of how you've been able to build your strength, how you've been able to build your endurance. I'm asking you about the things that make you feel good, and you don't know how to answer that. That should tell you a lot.
Yeah. All right. So with that, the website. Let me ask one more question. One more question, and then I'm gonna let you go because I've already kept you over an hour. Have you ladies seen The Other Black Girl? I have not. I've read the book. I have not seen the film.
Somebody told me it would not be to my tastes.
Mm.
Lovecraft Country was something I had my husband pre-watch. He had to pre-watch every episode, spoil every episode, and then we had to watch it first thing in the morning so that I could have all day to fill my head with something that wasn't going to creep me the hell out. Look, it took me a while to actually watch Lovecraft Country. I don't do creepy. I still ain't seen Nope because we waiting for the right Saturday morning for me to watch that thing. Look, when I say I'm a punk, I know what I am. I know where I stand, and I know what my tolerance is. So
Yeah.
someone told me that it was creepy and a little off-putting, and that I might not enjoy something like that. So I'm gonna put my sister and my husband on it, let them watch it first for me, and tell me whether or not it's something I can handle.
Yeah, I will say that the show is made seems to me more creepy than the book reading experience was. I haven't watched the show. I watched the book and I watched the book. I read the book, and it was to me it was well. I'm not going to say a whole lot because I don't want to go there. But I think the experience of reading the book is not what I witnessed watching the trailer. The trailer seems like they're really playing up the scary horror creepy factor a little bit. So I would say to people like maybe read the book first. I don't know. All right, y'all. So again, AnnaDoWright.com. Am I pronouncing that right? AnnaDoWright?
Anad. This is my first name backwards. AnadWright.com.
Oh, AnadWright.com. I'm like, oh, wow. Child, I've been saying in my mind, I'm like, oh, AnnaDoWright. AnadWright.com if you want to know more about Dr. Donna Oriowo and her work. And we will see you next week. I gotta go back and look at what's coming up in the pipeline for these episodes. But thank you all for being here. If you participated in the chat, if you asked questions or left comments, thank you so much for engaging. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see y'all next week. Take care.